Open Door is the podcast multifamily owners, builders, and developers turn to for insights, ideas, and identifying solutions. You don't want to miss the latest episode. Welcome to Open Door by Cox Communities, a show dedicated to bringing you the latest information, hottest trends, and newest technologies for you to consider when making decisions for your multifamily communities. Hi, I'm your host, Valerie Sargent. And today on the show, we're looking into the dynamic world of sustainability in the multifamily housing industry. Because as the push for environmental consciousness continues to grow, multifamily communities are at the forefront of adopting innovative solutions to reduce their carbon footprint and enhance efficiency. And I'm very pleased to say that joining me for this conversation is Chris Laughman, the Senior Director of Energy and Sustainability at Greystar, and Kelly Williams, Vice President of Environmental Sustainability at Cox Enterprises. Together, we'll explore the latest trends, initiatives, and technological advancements shaping sustainable multifamily living, and uncover the strategies, challenges, and success stories driving sustainability efforts in this ever-evolving sector. Whether you're a property owner, manager, developer, or simply passionate about eco-friendly living, this is one discussion you don't want to miss. So join me now in welcoming Chris and Kelly to Open Door. Welcome, Chris and Kelly. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's nice to be here with you. Since we're going to be talking about some of the most innovative sustainability efforts currently being implemented in multifamily communities, I think it would be good to start out with a discussion about why these efforts are important in the first place, and also how they benefit owners and managers and residents alike. So, Chris, I'm going to come to you first. Why is sustainability so important to Greystar and to the way you plan and run your communities?
Sure. We manage a lot of different clients who have different goals. They have different objectives. But I would say that most are looking to protect their investment. They're looking to minimize risk, and they're really looking to optimize their ROI, or return on investment. We focus on the resident experience as well. Increasingly, residents are looking to reduce their environmental footprint and minimize their expenses. You know, at the end of the day, when I think about sustainability and how it impacts it, it's really about reducing waste. You're eliminating wasted electricity that you're buying that you're not using efficiently, water that you're wasting. If you don't have to buy it in the first place, it doesn't cost as much. So there's kind of a triple bottom line impact for both the environment as well as the people economically as well.
That's really good for us to be thinking about. Kelly, what about from the Cox perspective? Why has Cox been committed to sustainability for many decades now? And can you share some examples of successful initiatives that you have done that have reduced environmental impact?
Absolutely. And I mean, as you point out, Cox has been committed to sustaining the environment for decades, going back to the 1950s, actually, before environmental sustainability were even truly words that were used together. So we do have a longstanding commitment to the environment. And it's because the founders of our company, the family, really have a passion for it. And so in a lot of ways, that makes my life a whole lot easier in terms of the projects that we do and the initiatives that we have in order to reduce our impact on the planet. So we've been doing this for a long time. And at a high level, I love what Chris just said relative to just reducing waste, whether it's waste that we would normally throw in the trash or wasting electricity or wasting water resources. We're all about that. And so we've had initiatives over the years. We deploy a lot of renewable energy. That would be solar for us. So rooftop, ground mount. We've even had some very innovative locations for our solar panels in retention ponds in Florida, of all places. So we've been doing these sorts of things to deploy renewable energy, to conserve energy through innovative building management systems. Also on the waterfront, deploying low-flow faucets throughout our facilities throughout the United States. All of these things add up to an appreciable impact on reducing our environmental footprint over the years.
Yes, I think that even when I was involved with Cox as a partner, when I was on the multifamily side, I didn't realize you all had that sustainability side of the business. And I think that it's been fantastic to find out as part of this process. So, Chris, I'm coming back to you as someone who oversees thousands of properties. How big of a role is technology playing in your efforts to enhance sustainability in your communities?
Really, the first step in sustainability is gathering data, particularly when you have a big portfolio. It's all about scale. And what technology allows us to do is it's to really better understand what is normal consumption, what is normal use, what do we expect, what's high performing, and what's not performing quite the way we expect.
So you really have to get that baseline in there.
You really do. I mean, if you don't have a baseline to begin with, you have no idea if you're being effective or not. So technology, it's really super interesting. A lot of the things that are happening now with machine learning and AI, because now we're able to take these big data sets and compare them to larger data sets and modeling and stuff in real time. A lot of times you just have that utility bill to help guide you as far as what was my consumption, but that's 30 days old, maybe 3 months old. So you've already missed the spike in the ability to head off that inefficiency. So what technology has allowed us to do is be more robust, maybe get that data faster, do that analysis faster. Did the analysis the other day, or a conversation the other day with somebody talking about touring our properties. And we figured if you did a 2-hour tour on each property, it would take us about 3.5 years to walk every property, not counting travel time. There's just no way to go do that in person with a large portfolio. You need technology to really leverage that data to give you the insights at scale.
So, if you have the appliances that are energy efficient and smart home technology, how do those contribute to sustainability goals in the multifamily communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's really in that same theme. It gets me the data more quickly. There's some really interesting technology in this particular area because before I would have to meter every individual device. They used to make a little device that you'd put on the plug and then you'd plug it in and you'd read it that way. Now there's devices at the panel that will actually read the amps and then identify what is using that energy based on the amp draw and actually comparing it against the entire catalog of manufactured stuff. If you take that to the next ideation of that technology, I'm going to be able to tell in time, again, back is that equipment performing normally or is it not? And perhaps even have the ability to move in and fix something before it actually breaks because I'm seeing an amp pull that wasn't expected or I'm seeing a spike that I wasn't expecting. So it really goes back to that resident experience that I was talking about earlier. When you're able to fix something before it actually breaks, you don't have to replace it, you're repairing it.
Right. And this is like real time information as opposed to the 30 days that you were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. What about some government incentives or regulations, Chris? How can they encourage sustainability practices in the multifamily industry?
The incentives are kind of the carrot that helps things pencil. And they tend to be aligned with whatever the governmental authorities are trying to encourage, or maybe the utilities are trying to encourage or trying to build infrastructure, whatever it is. So the biggest thing that they allow us to do is to potentially move forward with projects because the ROI is better because some of the costs have been offset. So you do need to look at your incentives. You need to make sure that your incentives don't have conditions attached to them that you can't live with. So I do caution everybody to look at the fine print and make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. But it is a way to help kind of take something that might not be feasible economically and with the appropriate maybe tax credits or rebates or however it's structured, be able to actually move forward when otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
I love the context and I love all the things that you're describing, Chris, that y'all are doing, especially real-time energy management. That's an inspiration that you have that capability across your footprint. I would also expound on the need for data in this space. I've got a whole data and analytics team. To your point, Chris, we ingest all of our electric bills, all of our water bills, all of our waste bills. And that helps us. It helps us with many things. Chief amongst is project selection. So again, to your point, we do business cases on every, for example, solar farm that we deploy. And linking back to the incentives, the tax incentives, they really do help us make our projects pencil as well. So we look at the financial return as well as the carbon mitigated as we go through these projects.
An important part of that, Kelly, is when you take that data and then you're able to go back and demonstrate the ROI, the piece that I a lot of times don't hear people talk about is then telling the story of the success of the project. So being able to go back to management, going back to those investors, being able to say, see, that ROI that we said was going to happen, it was actually twice what I said it was going to be. We actually turned out to be that much better, because it's important to point out the wins. It's important to show that, you know what, that investment that you made was worth it, because it helps that next investment happen as well.
Telling that story is really important for not only your owners and your company, but also for residents to understand too what your sustainability efforts are creating on the property itself. So, Chris, I'll come back to you on this one. How do green certifications such as LEED or Energy Star impact the market value and desirability of multifamily communities as we're thinking about how do we market these programs to our residents?
There's a few different ways. First, to point out Energy Star, probably one of the most recognizable brands in the world. I mean, when you walk into your local hardware store and you look at the appliances, you look for that sticker because you know that it's going to perform best in class. And in the real estate world, we have a similar certification called Energy Star certification for buildings. And that certification means that building, that asset is performing in the top 25% of all buildings in its class. So a resident who they're used to seeing that on a refrigerator and they see that on the wall of their leasing office, perhaps when they walk into a multifamily building, they know, hey, I recognize that. What's efficient about that wall? Well, it's actually the whole building is efficient. So I think it helps send a message. It helps with branding and marketing. A lot of the other certifications out there, their strength is really that it's a third party validation of what you said it was. So LEED, an independent body, looked at what you did. They made sure that you actually did what you said you were going to do. And now if you're going to go and sell that asset, a third party said that you actually built it efficiently. There's another one called Fitwell, which has to do with the wellness of the building and how it helps the either tenants or residents, depending on if it's commercial or multifamily, but how it impacts, how the built environment impacts those residents. Because a lot of people, we've been talking about energy and water and stuff, but the other piece of this is the people, right? And making sure that's a healthy building and that people have access to, trails and exercise stuff, have an active lifestyle, et cetera. So there's different certifications for different things. It's kind of hard to just generalize and say they do this, but almost all of them provide a third party verification that what you said is real is real.
Well, because I didn't really know about the Fitwell certification and what was involved in that. And I would imagine like walkability to places and things like that would be involved. Do you find that these certifications are mostly with relation to new construction properties, since obviously it's easy to implement these things in new construction? Or are you seeing them in the existing stock of buildings that we have as well?
They're in both places. I mean, most of the buildings that we live in and that we play in and that we work in are already built. So there is a lot of certifications that are exactly for that. That Energy Star certification one I mentioned, you have to be occupied for 12 months before you can even get that certification anyway. New construction certainly provides maybe an opportunity at the design stage to put best practices in place as far as like energy efficiency, water conservation, et cetera. So a lot of times you will see it maybe a little easier at new construction stage to get that certification, because you can actually fix it before it's been engineered in a way that's hard to do. But I tell you, sometimes I hear people talk about old buildings and how could that old building be efficient? Some of those old buildings were built pretty solidly. I mean, sometimes you have very thick walls and really solid envelopes, and I mean, there's some gems of assets out there that are not brand new. So it really goes both ways.
Kelly, what about you? Are you using any of these types of certifications in your facilities?
We are. We are certified, for example, on our Cox campus in Atlanta. And we actually go another step and participate on the standards body, the engineering standards body, that provides or develops the standards for these certifications. So we're very involved in that. And then I would say, relative to there are a lot of other certifications and methodologies associated with ensuring that what you're doing relative to your carbon footprint meets U.S. and global standards and those sorts of things. So we try to make sure that everything we do is consistent with standards and things like like LEED and Energy Star, but in all the spaces. For example, I'm really proud to say that we just achieved and were certified zero waste to landfill across our enterprise footprint. And so while that's not energy, clearly that is waste, and it's basically based on our ability to meet the methodology and diversion criteria set forth by that organization.
That's fantastic. And maybe this is for both of you. With the way that our temperatures have been rising up a little bit lately, what role do energy efficient HVAC systems and insulation play in reducing energy consumption, both in multifamily communities and in business? So, Kelly, I'll come back to you with that.
Mhm. It's fundamental to our strategy, honestly. I mean, there's a school of thought out there that would say, well, as long as the grid is going green, then being more efficient on the energy consumption side really isn't as important from a greenhouse gas emission perspective. We wholeheartedly disagree with that philosophy. Energy efficiency and energy conservation is always the right thing to do, because if we don't do that, it's just going to take that much longer for the grid to be 100% green. So we do exactly what you were saying, HVAC upgrades to ensure that we're running the most efficient HVAC systems, in our buildings and facilities throughout the country and the world for that matter. We deploy LED lighting. We use state-of-the-art building management systems to ensure that we, for the entire facility, are being as energy efficient as possible relative to when lights come on and off and temperature controls and those sorts of things. So energy conservation is at the very center of our strategy relative to moving towards carbon neutrality.
When you think about any building, the envelope has a lot to do with the ability to capture air that you've conditioned, either heated or cooled, right? Which is the purpose of HVAC. And then obviously ventilation is a piece of that, bringing in your air exchanges so that you have fresh air, which helps all of us from a staying awake and alert perspective. But yeah, I mean, we continually look at that. It's a little more difficult probably to make HVAC changes in existing buildings just because the infrastructure is pretty intense and pretty much tied to that type of equipment. And there's typically long lives expected with those equipment. So like whenever you have a 10-year expected life for an HVAC unit, you kind of need to realize your investment. You need to make sure it lasts 10 years. Which is honestly kind of part of sustainability, is also making sure that the asset life is realized.
Chris, please share with us some of the most innovative and sustainable building materials, maybe construction techniques, or any industry trends that you've observed that are contributing to greener multifamily developments.
Probably the two largest trends that have to do with construction and building materials are the impact of what we call scope 3 emissions. And scope 3 emissions are going to be supply chain emissions, which means the person or the company that I'm buying from, their impact on the site. So that's a bit of a change probably for somebody who sells carpet to be able to tell me, hey, how much electricity did you use at your factory? Most people try to position it about their product and how their product impacts my property. But when it comes to scope 3, I'm actually asking about how you and your operations indirectly impact me. So that's probably one of the first ones. And we've seen that with legislation in California most recently.
Right, because it's becoming a requirement, right?
Exactly. So we have to start thinking about how does that impact us? Because particularly in construction, there's a great deal of materials being purchased. So there's a lot of information I need from those companies that are that are manufacturing and selling those materials to us. So you have to think about yourself, not just your product. The other piece is what we call embodied carbon. And when we think about the impact of the built environment, they say, is responsible for about 39% of all global emissions, climate emissions, carbon emissions. About 10% of that is from construction. So like 29 is from ongoing operations, 10% is from construction. And by that, what we're really talking about is what goes into that material in order for me to then take that material and use it in my building. So concrete, for example, a lot of people don't realize concrete has a massive carbon footprint. Why? Because you literally have to melt rock in order to make it into concrete or make it into cement, which becomes part of concrete. And in order to melt rock, it takes a pretty hot flame, which uses a lot of energy, and thus there's a carbon footprint. So a lot of the technology that we're seeing about being greener has to do with how do we actually produce or make these materials in ways that are less carbon intensive. So you're seeing the concrete industry in particular taking a big stance on things that they can do to maybe reduce the amount of energy they use when they make concrete. Steel is another big one because, as you know, you melt these alloys together in order to make steel. It's anytime there's a flame, there's emissions. So therefore, there's emissions with steel. So that's really the focus, I think, on the building side has been try to find materials that are more efficient, so they leak less and they waste less, and that are less carbon intensive.
Those are great thoughts.
I would amplify, especially the scope 3 piece. So just for clarity for our listeners, there are three aspects or three scopes to carbon emission. Scope 1, so if you burn a flame, that's emitting a greenhouse gas, that's scope 1. Scope 2 is indirect emissions through primarily electricity usage. So those electrons are being generated by something upstream. If it's being generated by a renewable source like wind or solar, then there is no carbon implication. However, we still have, coal-fired plants and we have gas plants. And so scope 2 contributes to their scope 1, the electricity company's scope 1. And then there's scope 3, which is essentially everything else. And so we are also very focused on scope 3 for our partners. Scope 3 gets ridiculously complicated. There are 15 categories within scope 3, and I'm not going to bore anyone with those details. But I think the point I'd like to make is we're very fortunate to be a communication provider to Chris and his company. And so our scope 1 and 2 become his scope 3.
Right.
And so reducing our scope 1 and 2 benefits Greystar and their scope 3 footprint and helps them reduce their scope 3. So it's just another reason that we are so focused on scope 1 and 2 to ensure that our customers and our partners, get the benefit of that through their scope 3 footprints.
And I'm just curious about this from an operator perspective, as far as, how people run properties. What's the communication process of all of this?
It really depends on the sophistication of the supplier. When possible, if this is publicly available information, we can scrape it through annual reports and disclosures, that type of thing. When it's not public, then there's surveys and that type of stuff. When you haven't even calculated it, then we can introduce you to a consultant who might help you figure out how to calculate it. So it just really has to do with each company and where they are in their journey. Most companies, as they get more mature, as Kelly's talking about, they understand that we have a need for this material. And then it's accounted for, like you said, it's very complicated. But basically, the amount of revenue that I would spend with this particular supplier, whatever percent of their total revenue that is, then typically, and this is very generally speaking at its most elementary level, their amount of emissions equals that. So if 1% of Cox's total revenue is made from Greystar purchases, then 1% of Cox's emissions are also Greystar's scope 3. Now, that leaves a lot of things out. So as you get more sophisticated, we start getting into the ability to say SKU level tracking. Like if you buy product A from me, but not product B, then you can actually even reduce it further. So it can get as detailed as you like. And to Kelly's point, it gets really complicated really fast because it's somebody else's emissions. And particularly scope 3, until the California regulation passed last winter, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on a need to solve it. Companies realized they needed to understand their own scope 1 or scope 2 perhaps, but they didn't really think about scope 3 with near the intensity that they are now because that legislation passed. Now, granted, in Europe, there's some regulations over there that do require just a little bit different state of mind in Europe, where they're a little bit ahead on that, but it's kind of an evolving conversation.
The only thing I was going to add is that, for example, in terms of being able to disclose our carbon footprint to our partners, we have begun participating in what's called CDP, CDP originally stood for the Carbon Disclosure Project. Now it's much more broad than just carbon. So that's one fairly efficient mechanism to share our carbon footprint with our partners in order to make them capturing their scope 3 easier and in a more standardized way.
That's super important too, because CDP is a methodology of calculation that's accepted. They set a industry accepted standard that's universally accepted as this is the way that you should calculate. So if you're then getting that information from companies that are CDP followers, I guess you could call them, then you know that that data is all going to be consistently calculated the same way so that you know how it was generated versus I just came up with Chris's method and I just think it's this.
So, Chris, something else I was hoping you could talk a little bit about is the financial benefits of investing in sustainability measures. Why should other owners or developers be serious about considering investing in sustainability initiatives?
I think it boils down to what is a sustainability initiative, right? And a sustainability initiative is something that is going to help you realize the expected life of the asset or what it is you're purchasing. When you purchase real estate, you do a pro forma, you're trying to figure out what you think the anticipated returns will be. You kind of want to hit those returns. You kind of want to realize what you think the investment is going to do. Sustainability is all about minimizing those risks. It's like trying to understand what could potentially happen to this property. What are the shocks? What are the stressors? What are the different, is it in a floodplain? Is it in a place that's prone to fires? Is it in a place that has sea level rise? What are things I can do at the building level to preserve my asset value? And then also, as we were talking earlier, what are ways I can minimize operational expenses because I'm not wasting it? And that improves your net operating income. So you're not only improving your profitability, but you're also making sure that the asset full value is realized. So it really boils down to Econ 101. I mean, if you don't normally invest because you want to lose money, you want that to be protected. So sustainability is a strategy to take a holistic view and actually try to figure out how do I protect this investment.
That's wonderful. Kelly, as we think about this, is there anything that you have observed that might be helpful for those property owners as well as they think about investing in sustainability initiatives?
It is never the wrong thing to do to invest in sustainability because at the end of the day, it's conservation. And so to the extent that you're conserving electricity, you're also improving your financial model. Is just one example. To the extent that you are reducing your footprint from a waste perspective, a big part of that can be not consuming to begin with. Again, that improves your financial model. Recycling can actually be a profitable venture. So recycling is the right thing to do both from a planet perspective and from a financial perspective.
Well, Chris, when we think about our residents, how are there some ways that we can engage those residents in the sustainability initiatives in our multifamily communities? What might some good ideas be for that?
So earlier we talked just briefly about the importance of storytelling. And I think when it comes to residents, you have to engage them in a way that they realize how it benefits them. You need to walk in their shoes for a minute. You need to take a what's in it for me approach from their perspective. So when you're talking about how this might reduce their energy bills, their water bills, that might positively impact them. It might be that the LED light doesn't have to be changed as often. It doesn't burn out or provides more even lighting. So it might be something that enhances their wellness or their experience at the property. So I think the number one thing, though, when it comes to our focus on resident experience is exactly that, like making sure that we're looking out for the residents' best interests. And when we're engaging them, we're trying to show them why this is important. We're trying to help educate, if you will.
Are you doing that as part of the tour process or is it more as part of marketing materials?
It's honestly, again, different properties operate different ways, but it could be incorporated at any phase. Energy Star has a program on the college side where they have a model dorm room and they actually put signage up and show here's where to set your thermostat and here's the low flow aerator, and it kind of educates the prospective resident of the features in that student housing apartment that are energy efficient, that are water resistant. And as a parent of a college child myself, I'm seeing that as, hey, that's maybe less money for electric or maybe less money for water. That'd be great. So, I mean, it could be engaged there. A lot of times it's just part of the normal building of a community within that multifamily property, because you're trying to get the residents out of their apartments. You're trying to get them to come meet each other. You're trying to get them to talk to one another, have them come to the office for an event or to the pool for an event or what have you. And sometimes things like sustainability will pull out a percentage of residents because they want to maybe reduce their own impact. Maybe they want to reduce their expenses, whatever motivates them. But it's a motivator for a pretty good chunk, an increasing chunk of our residents.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you have like the signs on how to do things, because a lot of these people, they're renting for the first time, and they don't know how to maintain their home and save energy. They leave lights on all the time. So when it comes to outdoor spaces, how do sustainable landscaping and outdoor spaces contribute to the overall sustainability of communities? Chris, I'll start with you.
Outdoor space is actually a pretty cool topic, because not only is there smart water irrigation, which are basically internet enabled controllers that make sure you're not watering when it's raining, and then make sure that you're not watering when the soil is adequately moist, if you will. And then you can get into things like xeriscaping and native plantings and planting, plant material that doesn't require as much water because it's from this area. But really what I think the most fascinating thing is about the green spaces at a property is the wellness, the mental wellness impact that they can have on the residents, because they can help us escape like the pressures of work. There's several studies that talk about the calming effect of just looking out your window and looking at nature for just a few minutes can actually help benefit your mood, can help lower your blood pressure, can just observing nature in general. I mean, we were talking earlier, Kelly and I, about up in Montana and how beautiful it is up there. Part of that is because it's beautiful up there, and just looking out the window, it's just kind of cool. It's kind of calming. It's kind of nice. So you can really portray some very positive ability to mentally escape when you thoughtfully put landscape into play.
A big issue, especially out here in the West where I am, Chris, is water. So I'm wondering if you can please cover some effective water conservation methods that can be implemented effectively into those multifamily communities. What can we be thinking about?
So I'm going to peel this right back to my original statement about the importance of data.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how much water you're using, you have no idea how much water you're wasting. So it starts with measurement. It starts with being aware of your consumption patterns and being able to recognize irregular consumption. So once you have that baseline, right, and that can be as simple as, again, watching the water bill, or as proactive as actually having active sensors and active technology that's giving you more real-time data. I mentioned when we were talking about landscaping, the importance of smart controllers on your irrigation. Very cost-effective strategy. And how many times have you driven past a property and seen it raining and somebody's watering their irrigations are on?
Absolutely.
And the other thing, too, when it comes to irrigation is walk your property when the irrigation's on. Are you watering concrete? Because you're probably just wasting water if you are. So make sure your heads are facing the right way. The little things that cost you nothing. There's your free tip for the day. Walk your property and watch where the heads are facing. But the more technology you add, the more smart the building becomes. You start getting sensors. You start being able to be more proactive. And when that spike in consumption occurs, you can react. This is actually an area where water leaks have a pretty big impact, because particularly in high-rise buildings, a water leak can be a devastating impact on a building. It can take out floors of damage. You don't want that to go unnoticed. And the insurance costs from the risk side can be quite high as well as a result. So some of these are just mitigation factors. Like if you have a high-rise, you probably need to be thinking about, where are my water risers, and where could we potentially have a leak, and do I have water bugs or some other type of device in play to make sure we recognize it before it takes out 5 floors.
That's so important.
Those are all tools that are in our toolbox and we avail ourselves of across our commercial building footprint. The other thing that we do, though, that's a little bit unique because we have a water neutrality goal set for 2034. That being said, our water consumption is in our commercial facilities, not only for Cox Communications, but Cox Automotive. And humans need water, right? I mean, we
They
need to
do.
drink water, we have our restrooms, there are a whole plethora of things that we need water for to survive. So within our four walls, there really isn't a way to get to water neutrality. We can certainly be very efficient. We, employ xeriscaping, low flow plumbing, all of those sorts of things. But there's always going to be some amount of water usage in any place where humans live or work. And so the other thing that we do is partner with nonprofits such as American Rivers, and we execute water conservation projects within the watersheds that we do business. And so that is a fundamental part also of our strategy relative to getting to water neutrality in 2034.
One thing that's interesting too that a lot of people don't think about with the water has a carbon footprint as well. Water has to be extracted, it has to be moved, it has to be distributed. It goes if it needs to be heated. So if you are wasting water, not only are you wasting a resource that we need to survive, but you're also increasing your carbon footprint as well. And a lot of people don't associate water with carbon footprint, but there's electricity involved.
I never did until today.
It's an excellent point. Really excellent point.
Chris, when it comes to retrofitting properties for a sustainable future, what are some of the biggest things that you need to be on the lookout for?
When it comes to retrofits, every property is a snowflake. And the same building can be built by the same builder on the same side of the street and have completely different opportunities because of the way we build buildings. They're just not, it does not matter. They will have their own unique opportunities. So I think when it comes to retrofitting, you really have to take the time to look at the property and understand what opportunities are there. That's where some of this data stuff, again, you can tell I have a theme that data is important, right? That's where some of this data stuff really comes into play because I can start to figure out, is it normal? Is it not normal? Where should I take a closer look? But there's a stop point, like where I actually need to go look at the building. I need to figure out what are the retrofit opportunities. There is certainly things that you're going to want to take in mind. Is the equipment that you're looking at replacing reached its end of useful life? Are you looking at potentially doing electrification? Some places you may be required to electrify with certain laws that have passed in certain jurisdictions. Certainly you're looking to increase efficiency, not go backwards. Typically, energy costs continue to increase. So if I can use less of it, then hopefully my costs at least don't increase. Hopefully they stay the same or reduce. It's kind of hard to answer that in a generalized fashion because every property is going to be very specific in what retrofit opportunities are there. But the thing that you do have to remember with any retrofit is you have to be able to work around the existing property. And that's going to mean there's limitations on what you can do. There's access issues. There's just physical issues that might prohibit you from being able to use a certain technology or run something down a certain pathway that you were wanting to run down because there's a concrete beam in the way that has another function. So it's super localized, but there's a lot of opportunity in it. I will plug real quick, again, back to Energy Star. There's a thing called Treasure Hunts. Treasure Hunts is a program where you look for free, low cost, no cost opportunities on a property. It doesn't have to be residential. It can be commercial, it can be industrial. But basically, you take a maintenance crew and hopefully you have two of them and you have them walk each other's property. And you have them walk once during business hours and once during non-business hours. And you look for those exact things, like I said earlier, the watering of the concrete, lights that are left on in areas that they shouldn't be left on, maybe vacant units that have the thermostat not turned back, lights that are burnt out. I mean, it's a property walk. It doesn't actually cost, it might cost you a pizza to buy everybody, a pizza when it's all said and done. But there's so many great things that happen when a fresh set of eyes look at a property that, you can come up with ideas. Because sometimes when we walk past that light every day, we stop seeing it.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of helpful to get a fresh set of eyes on things and get some good ideas. And again, that's another no cost, low cost freebie.
So to wrap things up here today, I wanted to give you both a moment to leave the audience with a bit of parting advice. What is the most important thing you want them to take away from our conversation here today? And Kelly, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. I love that question. I've been asked that a lot. And my answer is really simple. Do something. Everyone's wired differently. Everyone has different opportunities to contribute to sustainability and conservation. Everybody cares about something relative to sustainability, whether it's the lake or river that you fish in, or the environment that you live and work in relative to ensuring cleaner air. Everyone has something that they care about. And they care about their kids. They care about their kids, their grandkids, and making sure that this planet is a planet that we all still want to be on 50 years from now. And so again, my high level answer is do something. Turn that light off, buy an EV if an EV works for you and your lifestyle, recycle, even if it's challenging. Just do something to move the needle and be an example to your friends and your family and get other people to do something, because sustainability it's the very epitome of a team sport. And we've all got to be pulling in the same direction as a planet in order to move the needle to keep this place a hospitable place to live.
We really do. We all have to pitch in. And Chris, for you, what is the most important thing you want our audience to take away today?
Man, it's going to be hard to follow Kelly's. That was so good. I think, though, I'm going to keep drumming the data drum. Figure out where your bills are. Figure out where your data is. That's the first step. Understanding what normal is and how do you compare to normal. If you don't take that first step, really everything from that point forward is a guess. So even if you did initiate some sustainability program at your property, if you didn't measure and get a baseline, how are you going to know if it worked or not? So I would say the most effective thing you can do, other than what Kelly said, which is, again, so good, do something, is figure out where your data's at and start working on it.
I love that. And I love that you guys were both here with me to talk about sustainability and how important it is, not only for the multifamily industry, but really for the entire world. So I thank you for your time here today. And thank you for the education.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Chris and Kelly for being on the show today and discussing the importance of deploying an effective sustainability strategy for your multifamily community. And if you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening. I'm Valerie Sargent, and this has been Open Door, brought to you by Cox Communities. We're in the top 1% of business podcasts for a reason. Subscribe now so you never miss a moment.